All right, I think we can get started. Hello, everybody. Welcome to this month's webinar. I'm Ryan Jewell. I'm a senior technical success analyst here at Civis. This year, we are on a roll for having a webinar every month. So if you're enjoying these, hopefully you'll be looking forward to the next ones we'll be rolling out the rest of the year. At last month's webinar, we had one of our clients, Middle Seat, present their campaign workflow infrastructure that they have hosted on Civis Platform. If you missed that, you can catch it on our YouTube channel. In today's webinar, our applied engineering manager, Jackson Lee, will be covering Civis's API and Civis's Python client. And then we have a webinar next month. Don't have a date yet, but probably later in the month, I'll be hosting and covering reporting on Civis Platform. So I hope to see all y'all there as well. If you do miss any of our webinars, this one or the past, or you maybe want to share them internally with members of your org, all of our webinars are posted on our YouTube channel, so you can catch them there. So let's jump into it. Jackson, next slide, please. All right, so if you do have any questions, feel free to ask them at any time using the Q&A feature. So at the bottom of the bottom right of the Google Hangout, there's 9 little circles all stacked up on top of each other neatly, and you can click on that and go to Q&A and post your questions there at any time, and we'll get to them at the end of the presentation. And we'll probably have to cover this at the end just for the people who come in later and don't catch the Q&A question feature. All right, next slide, Jackson. So before Jackson introduces himself and goes over the remainder of the presentation, I just want to give a little overview of Civis Platform at a high level. So Civis Platform is built around a pretty simple idea. All your data and Teams tools and data should live in one place. And of course, we believe that place is Civis Platform. On the data side, Civis is built on AWS Redshift with integrations particularly well suited for nonprofits and public sector orgs, such as ready-made connectors for CRMs like Salesforce and HubSpot. So getting your data into Platform is pretty easy. When it comes to digging into your data, your analysts, your data scientists, your engineers have a unified workbench in Civis Platform where they can write code in any language, such as DBT, R, Python, and SQL, build models, work with AI and LLMs, and automate workflows that combine all this together in one place. This prevents the need from jumping between platforms as your data, your ETL, your modeling, and all your actual insights are safely secured within Civis Platform. So once your data is unified and your tools are all in the right place, you can also use Civis Platform to create dashboards and other visualizations. So Platform is directly connected to Tableau and other visualization tools such as RShiny and Streamlit. So the people who need to see your data can see it in whatever format works best for them. Civis Platform also enables collaboration across your teams with role-based access controls and feature sharing. We're also SOC2 Type 2 certified and FedRAMP authorized. At the end of the day, with Civis Platform, your team gets to focus on the actual analysis and not have to worry about any of the plumbing. So with that, I'll hand things over to Jackson to introduce himself and cover the API and Python client on Civis Platform.
Thank you, Ryan. Yeah, let's get started. Hi everyone. My name is Jackson Lee. I am an engineering manager at Civis. I've been at Civis for almost 10 years at this point. I've held various data science and engineering roles here. These days, I'm mostly doing the consulting side of the work, like the services, the custom work, and I also help maintain the API client, which is why I'm speaking today. So for this webinar, we are going to cover first of all, the Civis API basics about what it is, and then we'll segue into like the Python client for the intro, and then we'll try to spend the rest of time like for a little more like code examples, walkthroughs, to show some of the tools and helper functions and other things that you might want to take advantage of when you build your workflows and scripts on Platform. And lastly, we'll close it out with resources and links. So with that as a plan, first of all, so why, I want to go through like why why bother with an API? So why do we have an API in the first place? So a lot of you, probably all of you, you're already users of Platform. So you know that you can log onto Platform. You can do a lot of amazing things on Platform through the web browser, through the GUI, the graphical user interface. So you can click, you can create a script, you can look at the run history, you can check out your data, look at this table, and then do all kinds of things, but all like manually. So by clicking, dragging, and so on through the GUI. When you want to automate things, so if you have to, if you want to scale, especially if you want your workflows to be repeatable, scalable, you will want to turn whatever you need to do into code. So we offer this way, the API, the application programming interface, the API, for you to interact with Platform programmatically. So that's the reason why you'll be interested in using the API. So at Civis, we have the Civis API. Officially, the source of truth for what the API is and what endpoints, what you can do with it. The documentation is at this link that we have, is api.civisanalytics.com. To see this page, you need to be logged on to Platform. So once you're there, you will see what I'm showing on screen here. So it's a pretty standard REST API documentation format. You will see, I think it's the intro text about like here's a Civis API. You will need an API key for authentication. There's other notes about like rate limits and things like that. And then probably practically like the most important reason why you want to see this stuff is you want to know what you can do with it, or like you have something in mind, you want to search whether there's a relevant method or action that you can use. So on the left, here, you can see the API is organized in terms of endpoints. So there's like, as you can see in this little image here, there's like admin and aliases. Probably you might have seen things like scripts, workflows and reports, templates, things like that. So these are all the various endpoints under the Civis API. And then under each endpoint, you can see if you use other REST API, you will see like verbs like get, post, patch. So these are the verbs that you would use associated with the API endpoints. And then under each endpoint, you can see the various like specific methods, like the get methods and post methods that you can use. To give you a little more concrete idea what I've been talking about, let me zoom in a little bit. So in the API doc here, in the search box, I typed in scripts and then Python 3 because I know there's a scripts endpoint, and then under scripts, I know there's a whole bunch of methods related to Python scripts on Platform. And for historical reasons, we used to support both Python 2, Python 3. So right now, Python 2 is long gone. So now all the Python related methods still have the Python 3 name here. So yeah, scripts and then Python 3. I can see all the relevant methods here. So you can see like, all the posts and get and so on. So in this, on this slide here, I have specifically picked post scripts Python 3. What does that mean? So this method in particular, it means you can create a Python script like by making this API call. So conveniently on screen here, so you see this code here on the top navigation bar on Platform. So normally, if you do things manually on Platform, you could click this code, and then there's somewhere that says Python. If you click that, you would create a new Platform Python script. Now, if you run code to somehow like call Civis API to do a post scripts Python 3 call, you would do exact same thing. So that's kind of the idea. Like the manual actions that you can do on Platform, you should be able to do them through the API as well. So in this call, I just want to highlight before I move on. So yeah, so each API method, probably there's like a bunch of like arguments and settings you might want to pass in. So in this case, when you check out the doc, you might want to pay attention to like, oh, what are the things that I may need to pass in or I must pass in? Like for example, there are like non-optional arguments like name, like you must name your Python script, for example, in this case. So moving on. I think I mentioned, yeah, this documentation is not public since you need to be logged on to the platform in order to see this doc. So that's the sort of truth. And today we are talking about not just Civis API itself, but also the Python API client that we built. The Python API client is public. It's an open source project. It also has the corresponding open source the documentation site. So with that, so yeah, you can right now anytime go to like internet, just go to the read the docs page for our open source package. And on this slide, I'm showing the page in particular for basically the corresponding page for the script endpoint, basically. So yeah, and then you all probably have used Python in some way. So yeah, you will see things that you find like pretty much very much at home. So you see the Python syntax here, like you can import a Civis package, and then you can make calls to do basically the things that you would do from the API, like the post and get and things like that. And then on the right, I try to show what I was showing like in the previous slide, but in the Python version here. And then you will see yeah, it's exactly what you would expect from a Python library. So there's a function, there's a method here. It shows you exactly what arguments are designed, which ones are like non-optional, which ones are optional, the keyword arguments, and then the whole doc string here as well. And then it also shows you like this method like corresponds to which exactly which API URL, which endpoint that we were looking at just now. So hopefully that starts to give you like a mental map about how things are connected and why and how we have organized all these things together. So yeah, so okay, Python client, more on that. So how do you get that? Like how do you download it? How do you install your install up the Python client? Well, the short answer is pip install Civis. So yeah, pip install, as you probably know, you can pip install any open source Python package available on PyPI. So, and obviously you can use any of your dependency strategy. Like if you use a requirements.txt, or if you don't use pip, you can use like poetry, UV, and so on. All these will work. So, but yeah, standard is pip install Civis, and then you'll be able to install the Civis package. Then yeah, yes. So the namespace is Civis if you do the import. Once you have installed the Civis Python API client, it gives you two things. Number one is it gives you a Python interface. So like I showed a little bit before, and also here, you could write Python code with the Civis namespace available to you, and then we'll talk more about that, like what you can do with it. But on the other hand, once you have installed Civis as a Python package, it also gives you a command line interface, a CLI. The CLI command, the top level command is Civis. So this basically does the same thing as you could in Python code, because we know that some people, if you may not write Python code, you may prefer to write, for example, shell scripts or bash scripts. If you are in that use case, the CLI is available to you. In the rest of the talk today, I'll focusing on the Python side of things though. Okay, so Python here. A very common pattern you see if you use the Civis Python package is you would import Civis like that. And then the next line almost certainly is you need to initialize a client session object here. So the idiomatic way is you call Civis.API client, and then you get the client object. As soon as you call this, this client object knows who you are, so to speak. By that, I mean, it knows which Civis platform user is using this package. Under the hood, this line Civis API client, once you call it, like open close parens, once you call it, it authenticates. It needs to authenticate. Oh, you're a Civis platform user. How does it work? So underlyingly, it tries to look for an environment variable called Civis API key, all caps. If you are running code on platform, either a Python script or a container script or a Python notebook, or workflows or like any Python services and apps, there is already the environment variable Civis API key, so you don't have to worry about that. So, which is why, yeah, you often see like example code like that, but assuming you already have the API key like in the environment where you're executing code. So with this, this client object is your basically your gateway to all the API calls that we've been alluding to. So client dot, for example, you can put in the high level endpoint name. So it could be scripts or it could be workflows, it could be other things. And then under this, you will need to know which method you want to use, and then you need to pass in the arguments as needed, and then you can do other things. So yeah, just to give you a better mental model here. So here I'm trying to show you. So here it is not about creating a Python script. So because on the screen at the bottom in the platform interface, you can see that I have already created a Python script here, but now I want to trigger a run, like click the run button, so to speak, like manually. So I could do it manually without using API, or I can do it in code. Now, how do we do this? The code is under the scripts endpoint, there's a method called post Python 3 runs, which means create a run for some script ID. And that ID happens to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 here, as an example here. So hopefully that gives you the idea like how you make the mental connection, like, oh, manually I can do this. In the API, I can find the action to do that thing if I need to do that in code. So another example, you probably, if you have used a platform before to run scripts, you know that like each script, you could have multiple runs for a given script. So here I have an example like I have a Python script. I have run it like 3 times. So I have 3 runs here. Programmatically, I can pull out the information for each run by, for example, like by using an API endpoint method that gives me all the details for the 3 runs. So, and in this case, it is under scripts, list Python 3 runs, and then I have to give the script ID here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 here. So that will give me like 3 response objects, each object being like, you know, the run details, like when created ad, like all the timestamps, like created ad, finished ad, and then the run state, did it succeed or did it fail, or like things like that. So this is how you can do things in like through the API by using code instead of going through the GUI and then clicking things around. Okay, so next, so let me go back a little bit. So yeah, so I've been talking about like, yeah, how you can use the Python API client to interact with Civis API. You create a client object here, and then you have to know which API endpoint to use and then which methods to use. So I would call this is like a low level way of using the client. Low as in not in terms of like whether it's better or worse, but low as in like we actually like you can make direct API calls, like basically the equivalent of what the API, the Civis API official doc would show you, like exact API method calls like that. So that's the low level API direct API calls. There are a bunch of things that people do all the time with the Civis Python API client, especially for I/O, for input output, for data import and export kind of things. So for that reason, we have written a bunch of you might call high level wrapper functions, and since like I mentioned, they have a lot to do with I/O, with input output, like moving things from point A to point B. So you will find a bunch of these wrapper functions under Civis Python API client under the namespace civis.io.something, and that something is one of these functions listed here. So on Civis Platform, like Ryan mentioned, we we offer like database. You can have your data there, and a lot of clients are on Redshift here. So your data could be a table on Redshift, like for tabular data. Sometimes you may use what we call the Civis files, which is really basically like our wrapper for S3 objects on S3 here. So that's what files are. In Python world, probably you're using some kind of data frames somewhere in your workflow. So for data frames, we know people use like pandas or polars more recently. And then you might also want to deal with like files, like because since we're talking about tabular files, we deal like CSV files a lot. So all these wrapper functions, they have a lot to do with like turning A into B, where A and B are some of these things. It could be a data frame in memory, in Python memory. It could be a CSV file on disk. It could be one of your data objects on platform as a Redshift table or as S3. So just very quickly going through some of these like at a high level, and we'll see some code later. So under tables, meaning a Redshift table, most likely, or and I know some clients also on depending on where you are, you might have Postgres, you might have a BigQuery. So you might want to, for example, instead of writing your own SQL query, you might point a table name, schema name, table name, and then you get, for example, directly a data frame back, read Civis or data frame or Civis. Yeah, I think read data frame, you get a data frame. Or you can do like the opposite. If you have a data frame in memory and you want to toss it up to platform as a Redshift table or as a table more generally, there are functions on it like data frame to Civis. That does that. If your data source is a CSV sitting on this instead, so there's CSV to Civis conveniently, and then there's the opposite, Civis to CSV as well. And then on the, I'm not going to go through all of this, but just to give you an idea, like, yeah, we have written all these like wrapper functions because we know through more than 10 years of work at Civis, we know both internally and also through client work, we know we need to do these operations all the time, which is why we, instead of having people write their own code, like to write the same 30 lines of code all the time, we package them as like these like convenience wrapper functions. And then for Civis file, it's the same thing. So file could be, sometimes if you have not really like a tabular data, you could have an arbitrary computer file and you want to make it available on platform, so that you can do something about it through your platform workflow. You could upload it like file to Civis, or the opposite. If you have a file on platform on S3 and you know the file ID, you can pull it down to this like Civis to file. Same idea here. And then that also interests data frames as well. So either polars or pandas. If you have a file that happens to be a plain text CSV file, as a Civis file, and you want to turn it into a data frame in Python memory so that you can work with it, you can manipulate it, you can convert it into something else. That's like Python, that's like file to data frame as well. So, like I said, yeah, not going to bore you like going through all the examples here, but yeah, just to give you just like, there's a whole bunch of these little functions here, like civis.io.something functions to. So basically, these wrap around a lot of the API calls under the hood, so that you don't have to write like the same 20 lines of code all the time to make your data import and export work easier. Okay. Okay, part two. Yeah. So I've kind of like introduced like Civis API and then the Python client. So these are, we could think of this as like, like Lego pieces basically. And now really the question is like what your use cases are, and then how you can put these pieces together and then combine them with all the other quote unquote Lego pieces, like all your Python knowledge, other Python packages, other use cases. So basically, Civis Python is really one of the open source Python packages, and you are absolutely free to try to combine it with any other Python tooling you have to create your workflows, your scripts. And in the examples and walkthroughs that follow, I'll try to show some of the things that we want to highlight, and some of them are pretty involved, but and then we'll say high level to kind of give you the gist of like, oh, what are some of the things that might be possible. So that's the idea. Before we look at code, there's one thing I want to go over a little bit. Where should your code live? You may have code locally on your computer. You may have code running on platform. I think today our recommended approach of like managing your code is using Git, especially GitHub. Why do I say that? Because Civis Platform has Git connection to GitHub, especially. So for both, so if you use Git to version your code, you manage your code, you know who did what and when, so that makes it a lot more tractable, and you can go back and forth workflows, or your code changes, and it's a lot easier to maintain code rather than just having code sitting on your laptop, for example. And then on platform, both scripts and workflows, there's a built-in Git integration, so you can point your script or workflow to a particular repo, and then a branch or tag, and the script or workflow will know how to pull in your code and to run it and to use it. And if it's schedule it, that's how it works. So just want to make sure, like, before I go into code, I should have a word about where your code should be, and the recommended approach is version control, and then using and taking advantage of the Git integration on platform. Okay, first set of examples here. I think 2 slides ago I was talking about there's a whole bunch of civis.io something functions from Civis Python client. Just to give you a little more concrete example, so let's say you have a platform table like under your database, and then you know what the schema name and table name is for some events. You can call, for example, civis.io.readCivis, and in this case, you can use pandas or polars. In this case, I'm just showing polars here. I want to polar state, so basically the equivalent of a select star from this entire table, turn that into a polars data frame, and now I get a DF here for data frame. And then with this data frame, you can do anything you want in Python, in polars, anything you would like. So for example, I'm doing a transformation by group by just to get some summary. And this summary is another data frame. And then let's say I want to toss it back up on platform as a table. So if you do a group by, campaign ID is some sort of counts. So in this example, you want to toss it back up to your database, to another table, to another schema, for example, and then it will block, and then you will get your data under the schema name, table name, through this data frame summary. So that's just to give you an idea, like, oh, you can call. This is how you can combine things like tools from the Civis package with your existing like Python workflow, Python knowledge. And that's how you can interact, like, oh, you can do something and then interact with platform and the API. Another thing I want to highlight, concurrency. So one big advantage of our Civis platform is it is really a distributed computing system. So you should be able to run code, run scripts, like multiple scripts, like at the same time. Like, so for example, manually, it is perfectly possible to like create a script and then hit run, and then you move the browser away, and then you go create another script, and then you hit run, and so on. So you could run multiple scripts, create and run multiple scripts at the same time like that. In code, you can do exactly the same thing, like depending on your use case. The recommended approach is to use something called a Civis future object. So in this case, at a very high level, the idea is to first you initialize an empty container like a list here, and to basically to keep track of the future objects that you are going to create. So a future object is something that keeps track of something that's running on platform in this case. So in this example, I'm using client.scripts.post containers. So this is creating a container script, really. So you might know that, when you create a container script, you have to set up a bunch of things like CPU, memory, disk space, and then you have to provide a Docker command. So it could be, so this is the bash command in the Docker command box that where you would type in your command or put in command, and then the Docker image, Docker tag, if you need to specify that. So you create a script, and then you can run it. In this case, I'm using another wrapper function that we have created inside the Civis Python client. It's under civis.utils.run job. If you pass in a script ID like that, it will give you back a Civis future object, and that's the thing that we want to keep track of. So once you run this line, it is the equivalent of like clicking the run button manually. So it will run, and the magic is that once this line executes in Python, it doesn't block, meaning this line finishes and it moves on to the next line, which happens to be like put this future object thing inside this list. And then it will immediately go to the next command that you have in this folder for this example. So the idea is you don't want to create a script and then run it, and then you have to cross your arms and wait for like either 5 minutes or 5 hours, wait for that first script to finish, and then you run the second one. This is not what you want. You want to run multiple things at the same time, taking advantage of the distributed computing environment of platform. So using futures is the way to do it. So you can create a bunch of future objects, and then once the for loop is done of creating the scripts and then executing the scripts, and once you exit the for loop, you have a bunch of future objects. So this is where you want to be like, hey, Python, pause here, wait until all the scripts, wait until all the script runs finish. And so this is where you take it, you use something from the Python built-in library, concurrent futures wait function. So you block at that point. Once all the script runs are done, and you can use the result to continue in your script. So that's the idea. So overall, the idea is take advantage of the Civis future concept, the object, to achieve concurrency, to try to do multiple things at the same time. In this case, I'm using a continuous script, but you can perfectly imagine something like, I want to give, I think things I've seen, for example, you want to run grants like SQL, like you want to update the permissions for like a bunch of tables, and obviously you can do that in parallel. You can run a whole bunch of grant statements like at the same time. So you would use probably not this call, probably something like query Civis. So civis.io.query Civis, and this SQL will be grant something something. And then in your for loop, you are probably looping over your different table names. You probably have a same schema, but then you have to vary the table names, like for each of the tables you want to deal with. So you can run grant statements on a whole bunch of tables, and then at some point you block on like granting on like 5 tables, for example, rather than running each at the same time. So just an idea here, and things that we've seen. Okay, next one I want to introduce logging. If you have run scripts on platform, you probably have seen like on the right, you can click like history, and then you can see the logs for a given script run. Civis Platform formats logs in using the Linux standard output and standard error, the 2 different data streams. Standard output stream appears in black, and then the standard error stream appears in red. Now, why do I bring this up? Because probably you would want red to mean something like, oh, something has gone wrong, or something like a warning, like something that needs not, something that you want to examine further. Like it could be an error, it could be a failure, it could be some warning. So something to draw your attention to. And then black on the other hand is like, oh, something normal. I just want to keep track of information. I want to know where my script run is at that point, that sort of thing. So with that desire, we know that logging in the Unix world, logging, if you're familiar with that, logging has like different levels by default. So there's like debug, info, warning, error, and critical. Usually you would want debug and info to be in black, so there's like normal information, and then warning or anything above in red. So to achieve that effect, we have built in a Civis logger for you, so that if you run code on platform, Python script, continuous script, and so on, you can use this Civis Civis logger. So this will be a drop-in replacement for the Python built-in logger, like login.getLogger. So don't use that. Instead, use this Civis logger. And if you do this, you would get exactly the effect that you would want. So on screen here, I show you this little example here. So yeah, info level logging, it looks black, and then warning or anything more severe than warning, it should appear red. That's the idea. Moving on. So this is So now we have some of the examples, not just in slides here. We have a public repo on GitHub. It is under github.com/Civis platform code examples. There you can find a whole bunch of like example code, like not just Python. There's like other things we have, but then focus on Python. You will find, for example, code like build schedule workflows report. The actual code on GitHub is a lot more elaborate. Here, I'm showing you the gist, just to give you an idea what you might be able to do to achieve. So in this case, the idea is you might have a whole bunch of workflows on the account for your data warehouse. Your workflows might be scheduled. You might want like a nicer way to visualize to see where your workflows are, which ones are scheduled, when they are going to kick off, and then to see some of the statuses of your workflow executions. So this is some example code to show how you might want to build a little report like that. So at the end of the day, this code is going to create an HTML report, which I'm showing you on the right here. So just to walk through the code at a very high level, first, you need to initialize the Civis API client object here as client, and then you want to pull in the workflows in code, pull in the workflows that you care about. So in this case, pull in all the scheduled workflows. So in this code, it's doing some kind of paginations, which is why you see a little while loop here. And then after this loop is done, workflows, the variable, will contain a whole bunch of workflows, like with response objects for the scheduled workflows. And then the next block of code, if you have used workflows before, you know that. So for each given workflow, there are multiple executions. There could be multiple executions. So this code is trying to pull out the executions for the workflows that you care about. In this case, there's a little wrapper function. There's a little util function called runs every day to check whether that workflow runs on every day. The code is not shown; it's on GitHub. So after this block runs, you'll get all the executions for workflows not running every day. That's the idea. The reason why we do this in this particular example is the code is trying to differentiate like the different execution status and try to make, like, for example, do HTML colors and things like that. After that, with information pooling, like metadata pull out from platform through the API, you can pretty much do anything you want. So in this case, not going through the code for this function build HTML. That's not the main point for this webinar. But the idea is you can pull out information from the API and you can write your Python code. In this case, you basically build HTML code. So this variable HTML, it is a Python string that literally has things like the angle brackets, like HTML, and then H1 header and things like that. So this is a giant string with HTML code. And lastly, the idea is you can use the reports endpoint and create a static HTML page on platform. So in this case, you throw in all the HTML code that you've just written in code, and then you have a little name here. So you can name it schedule workflows, for example. And then once you run it, then you get the report, and you get the report ID, and through which you can get the URL. And then on the right, and then on platform, you can open up that URL, and then you can see report. So that's the idea. So the idea is, you can use the Civis API, and through the API client, you can pull out metadata, pull out information that you will need. You can format that information in a format that you would want. For example, as an HTML report. That's the idea. And again, the full code is on GitHub. It's a public repo, so go check that out if this is something of interest. I think this is the last example. So it's kind of similar to what we've just shown. This is again also trying to pull out some information about workflows. But then at the end, I'm not going to walk through all every line of code here. But the idea is, go through the workflows, pull out the execution, the details, and then instead of making HTML report, in some of your use cases, you might want a CSV output, for example. So write that information as a CSV. And then of interest for this webinar is it's using one of the Civis IO wrapper functions, so file to Civis. So give me a local file path, and then upload that file to Civis Platform as a Civis file. And for that, you will get a Civis file ID. Now, with this ID, we could attach that file object to the script that you're running. So in this case, this is running. So this scope is assumed to be running in a platform Python script, which is why it's calling post Python 3 instead of post containers. For example, if you were running a container script. So the effect of this line would be creating what we call a run output, which is really an attachment to a specific run, a script run. So you might have seen it if you have used that before. You go to the history log pane, and then you see outputs you can drop, and then there's a little triangle, you can put it down, you can see what attached objects. You could attach a file, you could attach a table, you could attach a report. So in this case, it's attaching a CSV file associated with this run, and then put it there if you need that CSV output for further analysis for example, for your workflow runs. So that's the idea. So again, this is a very similar idea like the previous slide, but instead of an HTML report, get the data out format as a CSV, and then keep track of it so that you can use it for any further work that you might want. I think this is the last example I've got today. So finally, this is the page where we provide a bunch of links here. If you need more details about the Civis Python API client, the official documentation is right here, or you can Google Civis Python. I think this link will come up as the first result in your search. The official documentation for API, Civis API, like I mentioned, is api.civisanalytics.com. You will need the Civis Platform login to see this page. More generally, for Civis Platform documentation, not just the API, but pretty much everything, the public documentation is as support. So in the support subdomain here. If you'd like to see more code, like I mentioned, there's a public repo under platform code examples under the Civis Analytics organization space on GitHub. So check that out. Finally, the Civis Python API client itself is an open source project. So the code is on platform. So if you If you, for example, if you see a bug, an issues, or your questions, or even if you're inclined to make a pull request, you're more than welcome to. There's also change log for the updates that we've done in the past. Okay, I think that's all I've got. Ryan, is it time to pass it to you?
Thanks, Jackson. Yeah, as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, there is a Q&A section. So at the bottom right corner of the Google Hangout, there's 9 little dots neatly stacked on top of each other. From there, you can go to Q&A, and you can post in any questions that y'all have. We already have one from one of our clients. The question is, can a run output be attached to a run after the fact? For example, from a local script, just run on Civis via API.
The answer is yes, absolutely. If I can go back to, let's see how I can go back to the slide deck. Yes. So yeah, this final line here, you can, if assuming you know what the job ID and the run IDs are, you can always run this line after the fact, so to speak. So yes, even if your script is done, you can always after the fact run and attach a file, a table, a report to an existing pair of job ID, run ID. Yes.
Thanks, Jackson. We got another question. Does Civis have official clients in other languages besides Python?
Yes, definitely. So yeah, today the focus was Python, but we do have another official API client for Civis, and that's for R. Functionally, it is similar to the Python client in the sense that it also has this two-level separation, like two-level calls that you can get. So there's a low level you can call direct API calls, and then on top of that, there's a whole bunch of convenience wrapper functions available. Pretty similar. So yeah, so that will be for people for users who are more inclined to use R. Yes.
Okay, great. Let me look to see if any other questions. Can I use Civis Python client outside of Civis Platform for scripts or notebooks?
Yes. Let's see if I can go back to another slide I have. Yes. So yeah, so on the Civis platform environment, by default, when you run any script or notebook or workflows, things must be running under some user. So we always inject an environment variable called Civis API key. So to use a Python client outside Civis environment, yes, you can definitely do that. The prerequisite, the requirement would be you need to obtain this Civis API key. I think on the Civis platform interface on the top right-hand corner I think it's under your own name, like that little avatar, and then there's profile, and then you go to API keys. So you need to generate an API key for yourself. I would also add, make sure if relevant, scope that API key to the calls or verbs of interest if you're concerned about security, and then using that key, you can do all the actions that you could do, like given the scope of the API.
Thanks, Jackson. We got another question for the platform Git integration. How does that work? Can I point to a specific branch or file?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, you could point it to the repo, and then you can point it to the branch or a Git tag if you use releases and also Git tags natively through Git. Yes, you can definitely point it to a path and a specific file if that's the case. So your file doesn't need to be at the root level of your Git repo. I will also add that if your scripts or workflows are scheduled, there's an option to say whether you want that run at that point to auto check out like the latest commit at that branch. assuming using a branch. Or if your use case needs to be like, hey, I want this exact commit hash, I think there's also an option to point at exactly this commit, like just to use that commit, like the code at that point. So it's very flexible and it's very precise if you need that way.
Thanks, Jackson. Got another Q&A question here. So some of our Python scripts prompt the user for input in the terminal. Is there any way to run those jobs and prompt for input within platform? For example, of user input, we get a new sign up from Jim Smith. Do we want to attach that sign up to Jim B. Smith or Jim A. Smith in the database?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Anyway, yes. So yeah, definitely from a like platform script running environment, the Python input, the interactive mode would not be possible. So to the second part of your question, so yeah, if your data could be like, if you have a list of names that you can pass through from a database, from a CSV file or something, that will be one way to do it. Another way I can think of is platform scripts can be parameterized. So you can open up a parameter which would inject into your script as an environment variable, and that's how you can parameterize your script, like so that your script doesn't need like a hard-coded value for one name, for example, and that name could change depending on how you change that parameter, if that makes sense.
Thanks, Jackson. So there's an R API, there's a Python API. When would you choose to use one or the other, or are they interchangeable?
That's a good question. To be honest, I think it really depends on like where a user is coming from, maybe more likely where, like depending on the team. So if you join a team that has been using R, then you have to use R. If you join a team that has been using Python, then you use Python. So in my mind, there's no like, there isn't like something like, oh, the Python is better than R or R better than Python, both at the language level and also at the the client library level. I think the factor that decides would be like outside of the two libraries themselves, and it's more like either you or what your team would prefer.
Okay. Thanks, Jackson. Got another question here. Is there a way to pull in an instance-wide credential into a script-specific parameter?
An instance-wide credential into a instance-wide, as in like for the entire org, for that given client. So yeah, if a credential is set that way, so that it is shared with all the users, all the platform groups under that org, if that's what you're asking, I think so. Yes, definitely. So yeah, it depends on how you set the permission profile for that credential. I think that's the answer.
How would you use the Civis, the Python API and the R API interchangeably? Would you ever, you wouldn't include them in the same script? How would you use them together on Civis Platform?
Interesting question. My instinct is workflows, using Civis workflows, because yeah, Civis workflows, you can chain different jobs, different scripts together. So if you have a sub team using Python, they can create their platform Python script objects on platform. And then there's another sub team, maybe another project, you have R scripts on platform, and you can chain the R and Python scripts together, or even SQL scripts if you want, or DBT scripts. So these are all different script types on platform. So you can chain them together in your directed acyclic graph in your DAG, and then turn it into a Civis Platform workflow. That's how I would imagine like mixing languages together.
A question from me, Jackson. You showed earlier that you can use SQL in Python's API. What's the benefit of leveraging SQL within the Python API or the R API.
Oh, really? Yeah, that goes back to, I think, intuitively, the reason why you would want to like interact with the system through the API is about scale, it's about repeatability, it's about maintainability. I think one example I gave was like if you want to run grants, like you want to change the profile, the permission profile for a platform table, for example, and you want to run a whole bunch of grants for a bunch of tables. And you want to do that programmatically so that you can control which tables to run grants for, and then also on which Redshift user groups and things like that. So that will be the image of like why instead of going to platform query and run the grants and copy and pasting, and then you might run the risk of like, oh, I have a typo, things like that. So if you want to like, so yeah, you want to control these things in code so that things are more maintainable.
Okay. Well, it looks like we're at time, and we've covered all of our Q&A questions. So thanks, everybody, for attending. Thanks, Jackson, for going over all those slides and answering all the questions for us. This video will be on YouTube in a few business days, and we'll be sharing it out on our client meeting. So if y'all want to share this with anybody who wasn't able to attend today, it will be on YouTube. Thanks again, everybody, for hanging out with us, and we'll be having another one of these next month on reports on Civis Platform. Hope everyone has a great rest of your week.